Super Lucky Disaster Man. Chapter 34, Promotion Gift. Because there happened to be some kind of competition or event taking place when they were booking a hotel room in Tokyo, many rooms had already been reserved. Moreover, the young lady at the front desk thought they were uncle and nephew, staying together, so she suggested a twin room. The landlord uncle didn't bother to explain that only Komaeda Nagito would be staying, so he just went along with it. Now, it actually turned out to be convenient for a guest to come over. The bedside table was placed between the two beds. After the hotel room was cleaned, it was impossible to tell which bed had been slept in. Seeing the uninvited guest choose a bed, Komaeda Nagito casually threw his backpack onto a sofa chair and then sat down on the other bed beside it. "Did you sneak in through the back door? The front desk didn't contact me." Dazai Osamu cheerfully used his hand to push against the bed, using the mattress's bounce to adjust his posture into a sitting position. "The meeting just ended, but I don't want to return to Yokohama this soon, so I decided to take a casual stroll, and when I happened to pass by this place, I suddenly remembered that Komaeda-kun seemed to be here, so I conveniently dropped by to see Komaeda-kun, and I should express some gratitude for the book recommendations," Dazai Osamu said casually. "As for how I got in." Dazai Osamu showed a safety pin in his hand to Komaeda Nagito. "Even though it's just bypassing the card system, there are still backup mechanical locks, right?" Komaeda Nagito didn't ask how Dazai Osamu knew his location. Instead, he clapped his hands with an expression of surprise and delight. "Wow, as expected of Dazai-kun, even this kind of lock can be easily picked. I didn't notice anything was off at all." For any normal person, this conversation would absolutely be filled with internal complaints. "This is illegal intrusion. Isn't your focus a bit off here? Why are you even giving him compliments for this?" But in the eyes of Dazai Osamu and Komaeda Nagito, this kind of reaction was perfectly normal. If Komaeda Nagito's way of thinking were the same as an ordinary person's, he wouldn't always be so ostracized. Dazai Osamu even casually and smugly accepted this compliment, nodding with a shy expression. "You're too kind. Speaking of which, Dazai-kun, your timing is perfect." Komaeda Nagito extended his hand towards the drawer under the counter. "There's something I've been troubled about how to hand over to you, Dazai-kun." Although Dazai Osamu illegally intruded into Komaeda Nagito's room, apart from occupying a bed, he unexpectedly maintained a sense of propriety and didn't touch anything else. Seeing Komaeda Nagito's actions, Dazai Osamu couldn't help but feel curious about what the other person had bought, so he leaned closer for a look. What is it? What is it?" Komaeda Nagito took out a bag from the drawer, then pulled out a red cover book from the bag and handed it to Dazai Osamu. Dazai Osamu looked down at the cover in his hand. "The Complete Suicide. Didn't Dazai-kun mention last time that he wanted to try different methods of suicide, and I said I'd keep an eye out for you?" Komaeda Nagito said with a chuckle. "I saw this book at the bookstore and thought it would suit Dazai-kun, so I bought it. It's a gift." Dazai Osamu could have actually responded to those teasing him, like the little ladies, using his usual light and cheerful tone. However, for some inexplicable reason, he just couldn't muster the energy at this moment. So, after pausing for a few seconds, he spoke in a tone that was frankly lacking in his usual performative flair. "Thank you." Komaeda-kun always managed to surprise him. He had thought that Komaeda-kun was just making idle conversation back then, but he didn't expect that he would genuinely keep an eye out for him. Could such a book even be published? He surely must visit bookstores often, shouldn't he? It feels like he's missed out on a lot. Dazai Osamu opened the table of contents and took a look. He felt that this gift matched his taste perfectly, and his mood gradually brightened. "I didn't expect that there would still be people writing this kind of book. The author introduction page says they've passed away. If the author were still alive, I would have liked to chat with him a bit. As long as I could be of help to Dazai-kun, that's good." Komaeda Nagito, after handing over the gift, seemed to have another thought on his mind and said with a smile, "What book was Dazai-kun just reading?" Dazai Osamu suddenly thought of something, and he immediately flipped back onto the bed, reaching out towards the book he had carelessly thrown a bit far away. It's a book by Natsume Soseki. Today, I even had a little chat with Oda Saku about it. Komaida-kun, have you read this one? Komaida Nagito looked at the title of the book Dazai Osamu handed over and nodded. I've read it. How could he not have read it? As a devoted literary enthusiast who respects Natsume-sensei from the bottom of his heart, Komaida Nagito had purchased and carefully read all of the published works. Although this world lacks modern literary works, Natsume Soseki's level hasn't declined. Comparing his works with those of Natsume-sensei from another world, you can hardly tell that they were written by people from two different worlds. Most importantly, in this world, Natsume Soseki is still alive. Heaven knows how excited Komaida Nagito was when he discovered this. He immediately went crazy researching information related to Natsume Soseki, intending to dig up his address to send him a letter, and even thought about visiting him in person. Looking very much like someone with the potential to be a stalker, Komaida Nagito seemed indifferent to Dazai Osamu's illegal intrusion, even feeling honored, which is understandable. Dazai Osamu and Komaida Nagito exchanged their thoughts on this book for a while. He discovered that Komaida Nagito genuinely loves literature, truly understanding each and every book by Natsume Soseki, even having some favorite quotes, and could immediately recite a passage for him. No wonder, as Ongo mentioned, Oda Saku was clearly not in a hurry. Recently, he hasn't been visiting the bar much. It's because he's been staying home writing, and whenever he goes to the bar to chat with Ongo, it's always about random thoughts, and he even has to praise Komaida-kun a little. Spending time with someone like Komaida-kun, who has such a passionate love for reading, naturally leads to this kind of change. Originally, Dazai Osamu had thought that Mori Ogai's attitude towards Natsume Soseki was a bit subtle, but after he read it himself, he actually felt that Mori Ogai's attention to Natsume-sensei had some validity. However, that doesn't mean he would drop his suspicions. At most, he just finds Natsume Soseki even more interesting. Even more so, Mori Ogai paid attention to Komaida Nagito's comments and opinions regarding Natsume Soseki, and this could not be easily brushed aside. Komaida-kun really likes Natsume Soseki, ah. Dazai Osamu asked with a chuckle, which of his sayings do you like the most? Komaida Nagito, without a moment to think, replied, in this world, even if there is just one, it's good enough. It is essential to find that something that can capture one's heart, be it a great thing, a beautiful thing, or a kind thing. Dazai Osamu was momentarily stunned, then asked thoughtfully, which book is this from? Spring, because it was rare for him to feel such joy while conversing with someone, Komaida Nagito unconsciously relaxed. Just as he was about to mention the name of the book, he suddenly realized that it was from a Natsume Soseki book in another world, and quickly corrected himself, sorry, I forgot. Dazai Osamu raised an eyebrow. The last time, on that ship, he nearly recited the passage word for word, and saying he didn't remember the source could still be forgivable. After all, it might have just left a vague impression. But this time, with the most favorite quote, even repeating it verbatim, yet claiming not to know the source, was a bit too obvious. Especially, Natsume Soseki didn't actually publish many books. He went through all the Natsume Soseki publications available on the market and did not find any description similar to these two passages. But it doesn't matter, a bit of mystery makes things more interesting. Besides, the headache is for Boss Mori to deal with. He is not as interested in the relationship between Natsume Soseki and Komaida Nagito as Boss Mori is. Therefore, even though it's rare that Komaida Nagito had let something slip, Dazai Osamu, completely unlike his usual self who would interrogate the interrogation division and intelligence division with a frighteningly high efficiency, instead tolerated and let this matter go, merely commenting casually, indeed, it sounds just like something Komaida-kun would say. Even if there is just one, it's good enough. It is essential to find that something that can capture one's heart. For Komaida-kun, that thing is probably hope. Since he found this, he can now strive to obtain it, which is equivalent to finding his goal for survival. No wonder even Boss Mori pays attention to Natsume Soseki, truly every word is like a pearl. No wonder it's Komaeda-kun, to be able to find his purpose for survival just like that. But, he has no way of learning from Komaeda-kun. Dazai Osamu thought to himself. If it were him, he would need to find an even more concrete goal. Because no matter how important something is, it will eventually be lost. Knowing this, of course, one would want to distance themselves from vague and empty things. But, even so, sometimes there is still a sense of unwillingness. The relationship between him, Oda-saku, and Ango would inevitably collapse one day, but even knowing this, he didn't pull away in time. And then there's him and Komaeda-kun. Despite knowing Komaeda Nagito's dangerous nature and unpredictability, he still approached him. What exactly was he hoping for? Dazai Osamu is staying at Komaeda Nagito's hotel tonight. After all, there are 2 beds, so Komaeda Nagito doesn't really mind, but out of habit, he still makes sure to ask, Dazai-kun, are you sure? There might be unexpected accidents, you know? If something unexpected really happens, I actually wouldn't mind at all, Dazai Osamu says lazily. In fact, I hope that Komaeda-kun can bring me more interesting experiences and free me from my daily boredom. Komaeda Nagito adjusted his school bag, his movements subtly pausing for a moment. Although Komaeda Nagito appeared to many as someone with a bit of a problem in the head, he actually understood others' thoughts very clearly, he just didn't care about them. Either they distanced themselves because they couldn't understand him, or they stayed away because of the misfortune he brought. But after knowing all that, not only did he not leave, but he even said something like, hope you brings me even more interesting experiences. He had grown up without ever encountering a competitor like Dazai Osamu. Even after many obvious hints to keep a distance, the other party remained unfazed, leaving him in a rare situation where he didn't know how to respond. Although Dazai-kun is drawn toward death, there is still a vast difference between suicide and accidental death. If he were to die accidentally, perhaps the answers Dazai-kun is searching for would slip away. That would be far too despairing. Maybe if he waits a little longer, Dazai-kun will come to understand. Thinking like that, Komaeda Nagito frowned and ignored the strange feeling in his heart caused by entering an unfamiliar social interaction, calmly accepting the offer to stay with Dazai Osamu. However, is Dazai-kun on a break? It seems like you're quite relaxed. The Port Mafia isn't exactly a proper company, and yet an important executive candidates ran off to Tokyo and didn't return at night. No matter how you think about it, that shouldn't happen during a busy time. Dazai Osamu thought for a moment. Actually, I'll be promoted to executive tomorrow. Komaeda Nagito. Even Komaeda Nagito had to stay silent for a moment at this time, because the tone, which seemed like saying, I want to sleep in tomorrow, really didn't match up with such a big piece of news. Is Dazai-kun unhappy? Not really, it's just that I knew such a day would come very early on, so it feels natural, nothing worth being happy about. Dazai Osamu said casually, since I'm being promoted to executive, now all the busy work is on others. Compared to them, I am indeed a lot more free. Is that so? Komaeda Nagito showed a look of understanding, smiling as he said, then this book that I'm giving is quite timely, consider it a promotion gift. As Komaeda Nagito said this, Dazai Osamu was taken aback. This is quite new, to put it this way, Komaeda-kun is actually the first person to give me a promotion gift. Is that so? Then I am truly honored. Oh, that reminds me. Dazai Osamu suddenly became very interested and suggested, next, I'm sure I'll receive another round of gifts, so I should consider a return gift. Sitting at the desk in front of the open notebook, working on his assignments, Komaeda Nagito asked in confusion. I don't quite understand the role of ceremonial etiquette. But do you really have to return the favor at a promotion celebration? It kind of feels like it's a reminder to people, I got promoted, but you haven't. Plus, it's a bit unexpected that Dazai-kun would consider something like this, huh? Dazai Osamu pondered, actually, it's because when I was recently experimenting with cooking, I made a lot of chicken soup, but I couldn't finish it myself. Boss Mori said that since I had too much left over, he would proportionally increase my workload. I didn't originally think of this method, but now it seems like I can use it as a return gift to handle the excess. Komaeda Nagito also recalled the time on the ship when Dazai Osamu mentioned that he wanted to create tofu that could pierce a person and decided to start studying cooking. He couldn't help but feel interested and asked, "Dazai-kun, did you directly start learning how to make chicken soup?" "It's a nourishing soup I developed based on countless chicken soup recipes," Dazai Osamu said lightly. "I named it Vitality Chicken Soup. After drinking it, one can maintain an excess of energy for a long period of time." Komaeda Nagito immediately praised, as expected of Dazai-kun, even cooking can be mastered so quickly. "But why chicken soup?" "This is what I wanted to ask you, about your neighbor." Dazai Osamu moved his gaze away from the book, looking towards Komaeda Nagito, and said with a smile, "When I went to consult him, he mentioned that making soup is relatively foolproof." "My neighbor," Komaeda Nagito immediately caught on, "Amuro-san? Did he really teach you cooking?" "Oh wow, Dazai-kun actually went to learn cooking from Amuro-san. It turned out to be true." "Indeed, he's such a kind person." Dazai Osamu could now use this peculiar description about someone else. "I barely had to ask," and he agreed right away. In fact, while staying peacefully at the apartment, Amuro Toru was suddenly approached by Dazai Osamu at his door. He thought it was because his investigation into the port mafia had drawn the attention of Dazai Osamu. When he heard Dazai Osamu's completely irrelevant request, he almost couldn't control his expression and blurted out, "Who told you that I'm good at cooking? Is that really something that needs to be said?" Dazai Osamu retorted. Amuro Toru held his forehead, pondering for a moment before concluding, "It must be Komaeda-kun. You and that kid are." Komaeda-kun, although he might do strange things like boarding a ship to gamble, he's really not suited for your world. Komaeda-kun likes beautiful, dazzling things, doesn't he? I don't have any of those, I've known that for a long time. Dazai Osamu replied calmly. But do you still have the spare energy to care about Komaeda-kun now? I thought you'd be more concerned about yourself. Hearing Dazai Osamu speak, Amuro Toru immediately became internally alert, but outwardly he still maintained a puzzled expression. Being sought out by a member of the port mafia is indeed a reason for concern. But aren't you here for academic research? You want to go with that story? I've been quite busy lately. Gathering intelligence among colleagues isn't really a big deal, is it? There's no need for you to be so cautious, Dazai Osamu said with a smile. After all, aside from gathering information, you haven't done much else. However, there's something I'm very curious about, and I hope you can answer me. Amuro Toru confirmed that it was because of a mission from the liquor factory that he was being sought out, and since the other party had no intention of killing him, he finally relaxed a little. What is it? Which faction's resources did you rely on to leave Reigo Island? Amuro Toru forced a smile. What else could it be? It was my organization that helped me fake my death. That's impossible, Dazai Osamu interrupted him. Although I did have you bring Komaeda-kun to the port mafia, but that was such a big matter, yet you abandoned the police and just disappeared like that. Even the special division didn't pursue you. This in itself is very strange. Dazai Osamu tilted his head, maintaining the same innocent yet curious expression. Your organization doesn't realize the involvement of the special division, thinking that, like others, you could fake your death and escape easily. But I know, if it's the special division, it's impossible to let go of any suspicious individuals. Hearing that, Amuro Toru thought to himself that he shouldn't have helped Komaeda-kun answer that phone call. Even though the conversation over that phone was choppy and filled with noise, it was still possible to deduce this part. As expected of the port mafia's Dazai Osamu. But back then, considering the situation, he couldn't think too much. He had carried out many tasks, but this was the first time he faced a direct ability user. Being able to regain his composure was already a sign of decent psychological resilience. He also had to consider how to handle the innocent civilian Komai de Nagito. He certainly couldn't stop this innocent civilian from answering the phone. Is it someone from the Special Division? Or perhaps from the Metropolitan Police Department? The Security Bureau? Dazai Osamu stared at Amuro Toru's expression, casually playing a game of guessing. However, even if Dazai Osamu managed to guess correctly, he still couldn't admit it, so Amuro Toru just responded with a fake smile, saying, "I don't know what you're talking about." Yet, it seemed as if Dazai Osamu had already gotten his answer, and he didn't dwell on the topic any further. He smiled and said, "Huh. Weren't we discussing how to make some dishes?" Amuro Toru. Dazai Osamu, could you really beat someone to death with tofu? No, what did Komai Dakuen tell you about me? What kind of person do you think I am? You can figure it out and invent it yourself. In the end, because he had a weakness held by Dazai Osamu, Amuro Toru had no choice but to find a chicken soup recipe that was guaranteed to be error-free and make it for Dazai Osamu as a gesture. Dazai Osamu, appearing completely unguarded, drank a bowl, exchanged contact information with Amuro Toru, saved him as cooking master, and then left with a smile. That entire afternoon, Amuro Toru felt as if he had aged 10 years. Thinking a bit about Komai de Nagito, then thinking a bit about Dazai Osamu, Amuro Toru couldn't help but sigh again. Kids these days. What is going on with them? And after Dazai Osamu got Komai de Nagito's approval with, "Your cooking level is pretty good," he returned to the port mafia and began wreaking havoc in the kitchen. Mori Ogai observed and, through the overly complex thought processes of smart people who tend to overthink, came to a conclusion. Dazai-kun was probably urging him to hurry up so that he could have more time to go out, get a promotion. Otherwise, if he said he didn't have enough rest time, he would only be able to hang around within the port mafia. In short, what was originally supposed to take several more days of preparation, possibly not ready until Sunday, somehow became unexpectedly urgent and got moved up to be completed this Friday. Considering that Friday would undoubtedly be a busy day, Dazai Osamu headed to Tokyo's Ginza Lupin Bar a day earlier, where he found that Ango and Oda Saku, as expected, were waiting for him with great understanding. "Congratulations," Oda Sakunosuke said. "Will you be busier from now on?" "In theory, yes. But for me, it might actually be a bit more relaxed, as long as the boss doesn't deliberately find work for me." Noticing the dark circles under his eyes, which made him look like he hadn't slept for 3 or 4 days, Sakaguchi Ango couldn't help but remark, "A special resting excuse. I really wish I could have that too." "So compared to that." "Oda Saku, were you writing something?" "Yeah, because there are so many trivial matters, I want to make the most of even small bits of time." Komai Dakuen said something like that, Oda Sakunosuke replied. "However, if I want to write properly, it's best to calm down and focus, so the time I spend refining it ends up being a bit longer." Sakaguchi Ango complained, "You've been refining it for so long, yet you haven't shown us a single piece, but that Komai Dakuen has seen quite a bit, hasn't he?" Because Komai Dakuen's suggestions are very helpful. "Actually, before it's well polished, I'm not really comfortable letting others see it, it feels a bit embarrassing." Oda Saku actually getting shy? Dazai Osamu said in surprise, "What kind of miraculous perfectionism is this? I never noticed this before, but I can somewhat understand why Oda Saku hasn't written a single word. Are you trying to imagine everything perfectly in your head before you start writing? I used to think too lightly of it." Oda Sakunosuke said, hesitated for a moment, then continued, If I submit a manuscript, and if it gets accepted, I'll show it to you all." Dazai Osamu suddenly perked up. "What? Oda Saku even submitted a manuscripts?" "Yeah, it was also Komai Dakuen's suggestion. He said that if you want to support a family, then having some extra royalties wouldn't be bad. Later on, the royalties might even surpass the salary from the port mafia." Clearly, the gathering only involved the 3 of them, yet the topic inexplicably revolved around Komai de Nagito, who wasn't even present. This made Dazai Osamu, who has Mori Ogai eagerly waiting for him to return, after the gathering ended, originally supposed to return to Yokohama to prepare for the busy day ahead, take a detour and head off to find Komai de Nagito. That guy Komai de Nagito, who didn't know anything at all, could only agree with Dazai Osamu's description, saying, Amuro-san is really a good person. That's right. Dazai Osamu said with deep meaning, I also think he's a good person. Komai de-kuen's judgment isn't wrong. Radiance, brilliance, filled with hope. These were things he didn't possess, but this Japanese police officer certainly had an abundance of them. Chapter 34 End. Author's note. Dazai, Komai de-kuen likes beautiful, dazzling things, huh? Those are things I don't have, but I've known that for a long time. Seeing through himself too well. Komai de is more familiar with unilaterally approaching others himself, and then being rejected. He hasn't experienced much of others actively approaching him. The Complete Suicide is a book Dazai bought when he conducted experiments after escaping, so at this point, he hadn't encountered the book yet. As for how the animation adaptation was made, that's the work of the animation team. I followed the original work, but the animation team changed so much that I can't even be bothered to comment on it. The Vitality Chicken Soup was mentioned by Dazai during the Dark Era. It's a kind of soup that, after drinking, makes you burst with energy, but the side effect is losing memory of the past few days.